9 hours before my wedding, I got a call from a fertility clinic. The woman on the phone was speaking quickly. "Mrs. Cole, your surrogate has gone into labor. The baby's heart rate is unstable, and we may need to perform an emergency C-section. We need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible to sign the consent forms." I stood there holding my phone, unable to speak. "I think you have the wrong person. I've never used a surrogate." There was a short silence. Then she confirmed my full name, date of birth, home address, and the name of my fiancé, Nathan Cole. I was supposed to marry him at 4 that afternoon in front of more than 300 guests. But at 7:12 that morning, a fertility clinic I had never visited was telling me that a woman was giving birth to my baby. I asked who the father was, Nathan Cole. My fingers went cold. And the biological mother? I heard papers moving on the other end of the line. Vanessa Gray. I knew that name. Vanessa was Nathan's first love. He told me they had ended things 6 years ago and never looked back. I thought that was the worst thing I would hear during that phone call. Then the woman said, "According to our paperwork, you are listed as the child's legal mother." My name is Audrey Lane. I was 30 years old, and I worked as a corporate crisis consultant when a company faced a scandal, a product failure, or an executive who had done something incredibly stupid. I was the person they hired to stop the situation from getting worse. I knew how to stay calm, so after I ended the call, I didn't cry. I didn't call Nathan. I opened my laptop and searched for the clinic, Harbor Point Fertility, one of the most expensive private fertility centers in Chicago. Then I called them back and said I would be there in 20 minutes. My wedding dress was hanging beside the bedroom window. The makeup artist was supposed to arrive at 8:30. A printed schedule sat on the dining table. Guest arrival, media photos, Cole Foundation announcement, ceremony vows, cake cutting. I walked past it, changed into a black sweater and jeans, and grabbed my coat. Before leaving, I looked at the wedding dress one more time. A few hours earlier, it had looked like the beginning of my new life. Now it looked like a costume someone had chosen for me, so no one would notice what was really happening. I arrived at the hospital at 7:48. The nurse checked my identification, and her expression changed almost immediately. She led me into a small conference room. A stack of documents was waiting on the table. The first page was titled, "Intended Parent Acknowledgement." Nathan Cole was listed as the father. Audrey Lane was listed as the mother. At the bottom of the page was my signature. It looked real, the way I wrote the letter A, the slight upward curve at the end of my last name, even the short dashes I used when writing dates. There was only one problem. I had never signed it. I turned to the next page. The embryo information was written clearly. Sperm provider, Nathan Cole. Egg provider, Vanessa Gray. The baby had no biological connection to me, but according to the paperwork, I had agreed to become the child's legal mother after birth. I had agreed to accept full parental responsibility. I had also agreed that Vanessa would give up custody after delivery. The last page stated that every person involved had been fully informed and had signed voluntarily without pressure or coercion. I stared at that sentence and almost laughed. Everyone named in that agreement had apparently been informed. Everyone except me. The conference room door opened. Nathan walked in. He was still wearing the white shirt from our rehearsal dinner the night before. His sleeves were rolled up and his hair was messy, but he did not look like a man whose life had just fallen apart. He only looked tired. He closed the door and asked the nurse to give us a few minutes. When we were alone, he said my name softly, Audrey, as if he were about to comfort me. I pushed the documents across the table. "Explain this." Nathan did not touch them. He sat across from me. "Vanessa's condition is unstable." I didn't ask about her condition. The baby could come early. I didn't ask about the baby. I pointed at the signature. "Why is my name on this?" He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Because I knew you would eventually agree." That was the moment I understood. This was not a desperate mistake. He had not been too afraid to tell me. He truly believed my permission was optional. Nathan told me that he and Vanessa had created and frozen 3 embryos 6 years earlier. At the time, they had been planning to get married. Then Vanessa moved to Europe. Their relationship ended, and the embryos remained in storage. 8 months ago, Vanessa returned to Chicago. She and Nathan got back in touch. She said she still wanted to have a child. Nathan agreed. They moved forward without telling me. I asked why. His answer came with a kind of confidence that made it even worse. You told me once that you weren't sure you wanted to go through pregnancy, so you arranged a child for me? This isn't just some child, Nathan leaned forward. This is my child, and she would have been our child. I stared at him. Does Vanessa know you plan to make me the legal mother? She knows the baby needs a stable family. That wasn't my question. Audrey, this is not the time to argue. He placed his phone on the table. It was 8:03, less than 8 hours before the wedding. Then he finally told me why everything had been arranged so carefully. Nathan's grandfather had left behind a family trust. Under the terms of that trust, Nathan had to be legally married and officially recognize a biological child before his 36th birthday in order to gain final control of Cole Medical. His birthday was 3 weeks away. Today's wedding and the baby's birth solved both problems. After the ceremony, I would become Mrs. Cole. The child would be registered as part of our household. Vanessa would receive a large payment and leave Chicago. Nathan would gain control of the company, and according to him, I would finally have a family. He explained it like a business deal that benefited everyone. I asked him, "What exactly do you need me to do today?" "The wedding continues as planned, and after that, the hospital needs you to sign one final acknowledgement before the surgery. What if I refuse?" For the first time, his expression changed. Not guilt, annoyance. "Audrey, don't make everything more difficult today." I stayed quiet. He kept talking. More than 300 people were attending the wedding. Board members, investors, and reporters would all be there. The ceremony was also part of the Cole Foundation's annual charity event and would be live-streamed. If I canceled at the last minute, the market would assume the company was unstable. There was an important board vote coming in a few weeks. He could not afford to lose public confidence. I listened until I finally understood my role in his plan. I was supposed to become his wife, sign papers making me responsible for another woman's child, then stand beside him and protect his company's reputation. My feelings were not part of the plan. Neither was my choice. I stood. Nathan stood too and reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Don't touch me." He stopped. "Audrey, I understand that you're shocked." "I'm not shocked." I looked at him. "I finally understand what you think I am." His forehead tightened. "I love you. You forged my signature. We were running out of time. You created a child with another woman and hid it from me. That process started before our engagement. We got engaged 8 months ago." He had nothing to say to that. So I asked one last question. "If the clinic had never called me, when were you planning to tell me?" Nathan said nothing. I no longer needed an answer. As I walked out of the conference room, I heard sudden movement at the other end of the hallway. Several nurses rushed past, pushing a hospital bed. The woman lying on it was pale. Her blonde hair was stuck to her face with sweat. She saw me. Our eyes met for less than a second, but I recognized her. Vanessa Gray. In photographs, she always looked polished. Perfect dresses, perfect makeup. The kind of woman who had spent her whole life knowing exactly where to look when a camera appeared. That morning she was gripping the sheet beneath her and looking terrified. She raised one hand as if she wanted to say something to me. Then the nurses pushed her into the elevator. Nathan came out of the conference room behind me. He looked toward the elevator, then at me. His body had already turned in Vanessa's direction. "Go," I said. He looked confused. I repeated it. "Go. The place you actually want to be right now isn't our wedding. Audrey, don't do this. I'm not stopping you. We're still getting married this afternoon." I looked at him. "No, this afternoon. There's an event. Whether it becomes a wedding is my decision now." I left the hospital. When I got into my car, I realized I was still holding the documents. The nurse had probably been too distracted to take them back. I photographed every page. Then I called my college roommate, Leah Porter. She was now a medical malpractice attorney. When she answered, I heard airport announcements in the background. I said someone forged my signature and listed me as the legal mother of a baby I knew nothing about. Leah did not ask whether I was joking. She asked, "Where are you?" "The hospital parking lot." "Do you have the documents? Pictures? Do not sign anything. Do not meet Nathan alone again. Send me your location. I'm getting on the first flight back." After ending the call, I called someone else. Miles Bennett, Nathan's biggest business rival, and the only person who had repeatedly warned me not to hide my entire career behind Nathan's name. Miles and I were not exactly friends. We first met at a medical technology conference 3 years earlier. Nathan canceled his speech at the last minute, so I went on stage and delivered the full presentation in his place. Afterward, Miles found me backstage. "Why isn't your name anywhere in the project materials?" "I don't need my name on them. You will someday." At the time, I thought he was trying to create problems between Nathan and me. Later, Miles offered me a position at his company, my own department. Equity, full credit for my work. I turned him down because Nathan said accepting a job from a competitor would be a betrayal. Looking back, it might have been one of the worst decisions I had made in years. When Miles answered, he sounded surprised. "Audrey, are you attending the Cole Foundation wedding livestream this afternoon?" "I received an invitation." "Come." There was a pause. "What happened?" I looked toward the hospital entrance. Nathan had not followed me outside. "I need 300 guests, 12 board members, and every reporter in that room to see something at the same time." Miles did not push for more information. "Send me the time." When I returned to the apartment, the makeup artist and stylist were waiting outside. My assistant Emily hurried toward me with the schedule in her hands. Nathan's team had already called more than 10 times asking why I had not started getting ready. I unlocked the door. "The wedding is not canceled." Emily looked relieved. Then I added, "But the schedule is changing." Her relief disappeared. I did not explain everything to the staff. I told the makeup artist to continue as planned. I told the photographer to take the same preparation photos. I confirmed that the wedding car should arrive at 3. Then I locked myself in the study. Leah arrived at 10:20. After reviewing the photographs, she said, "This is more than infidelity. This is identity theft, forged informed consent, and possible custody fraud." She immediately contacted the court and filed for an emergency restraining order. The fertility clinic would not be allowed to use any document carrying my signature. They also could not register me as the child's legal mother without my physical presence and direct consent. Miles arrived at 11:15. He did not bring flowers. He did not ask whether I needed him to destroy Nathan. He brought an encrypted laptop and an independent financial auditor. He sat across from me in the study. "What do you want to do?" "I'm ending the wedding." "Then why go to the venue?" "Because everyone attending today is also someone who has spent the last 5 years believing Nathan built Cole Medical by himself." Miles studied my face. "You want to expose everything?" "Not everything," I answered carefully. "Only the things he no longer has the right to hide." For 5 years I had handled almost every major crisis at Cole Medical. When patient data was leaked, I contacted regulators and controlled the public response within 48 hours. When a laboratory accident occurred, I rebuilt the company's victim compensation program. I helped prepare 3 major funding rounds. Nathan stood on stage and talked about vision. I worked behind the scenes to make sure every promise he made could actually be delivered. The press called him a medical technology genius. My official title remained brand consultant. I had never cared. I thought we were building one life together. His success felt like our success. But that morning, I finally understood something. When someone is comfortable hiding your work, eventually they start believing you were never important at all. Miles's auditor opened a document. Cole Medical was preparing for a major acquisition the following month. The deal required board approval. Nathan controlled 38% of the voting power. Another 12% was held through the Cole Foundation. But every major donation agreement the foundation had signed over the past 3 years had been negotiated through me. One clause allowed key donors to freeze funding and request a review of voting rights if the foundation's leadership became involved in a serious integrity scandal. Nathan needed the wedding to protect his public image. I only needed to prove that he had forged my signature. Miles asked, "Are you sure you want to do this at the wedding?" I looked at myself in the mirror. Half my makeup was finished. He turned my life into a public performance to protect his company. So I'm going to let the public see the real version. At 12:07, the hospital called again. Vanessa was temporarily stable. The emergency surgery had been delayed. The baby might still be born that afternoon. I asked if I could speak with Vanessa. The nurse said no. Vanessa had listed Nathan as her only authorized contact. At 12:40, Nathan finally called me. He said he was leaving the hospital and heading to the wedding venue. His voice was calm again. "Audrey, did Leah contact the clinic?" "Yes." "Tell her to withdraw the filing." "No. Do you understand what this could do?" "Yes. Nathan, you forged my signature." "I was protecting our family." "That was never our family." There was silence. Then he changed his approach. He told me the baby was innocent. If I refused to cooperate, the child could become trapped in a complicated custody dispute. Vanessa was not prepared to raise the baby alone. Nathan worked too much and needed a stable household, and I had always liked children. You'll love her when you meet her. I stopped breathing for a second. Her? Nathan realized his mistake. After a pause, he said, "It's a girl." "Did you already choose a name?" "Grace." I closed my eyes. The baby had not even been born, and they had already chosen her name. They had planned her future. They had planned my place in her life. I was the only person who had never been told. Nathan softened his voice. "Put on the dress this afternoon and come to the ceremony. We'll discuss everything else at home." "Home!" He said it as though we still shared one. "I'll be there." I could hear the relief in his voice. "I knew you wouldn't destroy everything. You're right. See you this afternoon." When I ended the call, Leah looked at me. "You didn't tell him." "No, he thinks you forgave him." "I know, that will make him lower his guard." I shook my head. "This isn't about catching him off guard. I want to see whether, right up until the final moment, he will still mistake my silence for consent." At 3:05, I put on my wedding dress. Not because I still wanted to marry Nathan. I wore it because I never wanted him to tell people later that the wedding ended because I had lost control. I wanted everyone in that room to see that I knew exactly what I was doing. When the wedding car arrived at the Cole Conservatory, reporters were already waiting outside. The wedding was also a Cole Foundation event. Cameras were broadcasting live. Guests stood inside the glass hall drinking champagne. White flowers covered the aisle. A large screen showed photographs of Nathan and me from the previous 5 years. In every image, we looked happy. No one knew that on many of those days, we had not even gone home together. Emily adjusted the train of my dress. "Are you really okay?" "No, but I'll handle it." At 3:40, I entered the bridal room. Nathan was waiting for me. He wore a black tuxedo. The moment he saw me, he walked over and hugged me. My body went stiff. He acted as though nothing had happened. "I knew you would come." Those were the same words he had used on the phone. I looked at our reflection in the mirror. His face showed complete relief. Not because I still wanted to marry him, because he believed his plan was under control again. Nathan pulled out a folded document. "The hospital needs one final signature." He handed me a pen. "Sign it before the ceremony, and then we can stop thinking about this." I took the document. I did not sign it. "Does Vanessa know?" "Know what? That you plan to make me Grace's legal mother?" Nathan looked away for half a second. "She knows the baby will live with us. So she doesn't know my name is on these papers. Audrey, we don't have time for this." Someone knocked and announced that the live stream would begin in 10 minutes. Nathan reached for the document. I did not give it back. His voice dropped. "Don't embarrass me in front of everyone." That sentence was more honest than anything else he had said all day. Even then, what frightened him most was not losing me. It was being embarrassed. At 4 o'clock, the music began. I walked into the glass hall alone. Everyone stood. Nathan waited at the front. He looked at me and smiled perfectly. I walked to him. The officiant began telling our love story. He talked about how we had survived difficult years together, how we had supported each other through struggle and success, how marriage was built on trust and honesty. When he said the word honesty, I almost laughed. Before we reached the vows, I raised my hand. "I'd like to say something first." The officiant looked surprised. Nathan spoke quietly. "Don't change the schedule." I ignored him. A member of the production team handed me a microphone. I turned toward the guests. At 7:12 this morning, I received a call from a fertility clinic. The room slowly became quiet. They told me that my surrogate was in labor. Someone gasped. Nathan's face changed instantly. He reached for the microphone. I stepped away. The screen behind us went dark. A few seconds later, the intended parent acknowledgement appeared. My name. Nathan's name. And the forged signature. The guests began whispering. I continued. "I never agreed to use a surrogate. I never agreed to become this child's legal mother. The baby's biological parents are my fiancé and his former girlfriend." Nathan finally spoke. "Audrey, stop." I looked at him. "Why? This is not the place to discuss a private matter. This wedding is being used to protect your company, your foundation, and your public image. You turned private deception into a business tool. And now you're telling me this isn't the right place to talk about it?" Miles sat in the third row. He did not stand up. He did not speak for me. He only watched. It reminded me that this was my choice. I was the one finishing it. The screen changed. The emergency court order appeared. Every document carrying my signature had been frozen. Then came the formal notice sent to Cole Medical's board. 7 of the 12 directors immediately reached for their phones. Comments on the live stream began moving so quickly that the production team could barely follow them. Nathan tried to shut down the screen, but the technical crew had already removed his access. That was when he truly panicked. He stepped toward me. He did not bother lowering his voice anymore. "Do you understand what you're doing?" "Yes." "You're going to destroy the company. A company should not depend on forged documents. You're going to leave a newborn baby without a family." I stared at him. "Do not blame a child for your decisions. You chose to lie to 3 women?" Nathan looked confused. "3? Me, Vanessa, and your daughter?" At that moment, Leah entered through a side door. She walked to the front and handed me her phone. A message had just arrived from the hospital. Vanessa had delivered the baby. Grace was born at 4:08. Mother and daughter were stable. Nathan's face changed. His first question came automatically. "How is Grace?" I did not answer. Because there was another message. Vanessa wanted to speak to me immediately. Her voice came through the phone and was carried through the microphone into the entire hall. She sounded weak, but her first words were clear. "Audrey, I didn't know your signature was fake." The room went completely silent. Vanessa told me Nathan had said I knew everything. He told her I did not want to be pregnant, but that I was excited to become a mother. He said, "The 3 of us had already agreed on the arrangement?" I was simply staying away from the medical process to avoid media attention. Vanessa believed him. She thought I would come to the hospital after the baby was born and take them home. By the end of the call, she was crying. "He told me you agreed?" I looked at Nathan. He could not speak. He had not only made decisions for me, he had also invented my consent for Vanessa. He had convinced each woman that the other had already accepted everything. That way, everyone would continue following his plan. Before the call ended, Vanessa said one more thing. I recorded him. When he asked me to sign the documents, I recorded the conversation. Nathan had been certain Vanessa would support him. He never expected the woman who had just given birth to his child to become the witness who proved he had deceived us both. The live stream was shut down at 4:22, but it was too late. Clips had already been recorded and shared. Within half an hour, the story was trending. Guests began to leave. Several directors stayed behind for an emergency meeting. Nathan's mother walked toward me. Her face was pale. "You could have handled this privately." I looked at her. "Does your family allow anyone to say no in private?" She did not answer. She only said, "The Cole family will never forget what you did today. Neither will I." I went upstairs to the conference room. 7 board members were already there. Miles and the audit team sat across from them. When Nathan entered, he ordered everyone to leave. The chairman refused. He asked Nathan to explain why company legal resources had been used to prepare false family documents, why the foundation's public wedding had been connected to a family control provision, and why a private arrangement that could affect corporate ownership had never been disclosed to the board. Nathan tried to call it a family misunderstanding. I placed 5 years of project records on the table. For the first time, I stopped protecting him. I explained that I had led Cole Medical through 3 major crises. My team created the patient trust program that protected the company's reputation. Most of the foundation's long-term donors worked directly with me. Then I showed them an internal email from 2 years earlier. I had recommended forming an independent medical ethics committee. Nathan's response had been, "We don't need outsiders slowing down our decisions." At the time, I thought he was simply overconfident. Now I understood that he was afraid of anyone examining his choices. The board immediately suspended part of Nathan's authority and opened an independent investigation. He turned toward me. There was no love in his eyes, no regret, only anger. "You were planning to leave me all along?" "No." I looked at him. "Until this morning, I was still planning to marry you." That answer seemed to hurt him more than anything else I had said, because he finally understood. It was not that I had never loved him. It was that he had destroyed every reason I had to stay in less than 9 hours. I did not return to the apartment we had shared. Miles arranged for a driver to take me to a hotel. When we arrived, he did not follow me inside. He stood beside the car. "Do you need someone to stay with you?" "No." "Do you need security or another attorney?" Leah already arranged both. He nodded. I'll check on you tomorrow. I was surprised. You're not going to ask what I plan to do next? That's your decision. His answer made me think about Nathan. Nathan always told me what was best for me. Miles left the choice in my hands. The following morning, the story online had already changed. Nathan's public relations team released a statement. It never mentioned the forged signature. It claimed I had become emotional on my wedding day and dragged an innocent baby into a business dispute. Then an edited video began circulating. It only showed the moment I said, "That was never our family." The headline read, "Bride rejects baby because she isn't the biological mother." People called me cold. They said I was jealous of a newborn. Some said that real love meant accepting your partner's past. I watched for 10 minutes and shut off my phone. For the past 5 years, this had been my job. Take a complicated truth and reduce it to the version that made Nathan look best. Now he was using the same strategy against me. By 11 that morning, 3 of the Cole Foundation's largest donors had suspended their support. By 1 o'clock, my consulting firm had received 4 cancellation notices. Each client gave the same reason. They did not want to become involved in a personal scandal. I thought I was prepared. But when I saw my employees sitting in the conference room waiting for answers, I became afraid. They had rent, mortgages, children. I could leave Nathan, but they could lose their jobs because of my decision. For the first time, I doubted myself. Maybe revealing everything publicly had been too impulsive. Maybe I should have protected the company first. Maybe I should have stayed quiet one more time. Then Vanessa sent me an audio recording. Nathan's voice was unmistakable. Audrey will agree eventually. She hates conflict. Once the baby is born, she won't make a scene. I listened to it 3 times. Then I sent it to Leah. That was when I finally understood my patience had never earned respect. My willingness to understand him had not made him value me. It only convinced him that he could keep crossing my boundaries. 3 days later, Vanessa was released from the hospital. She did not take Grace to the house Nathan had prepared. Instead, she moved into a protected apartment Leah had arranged. Nathan was furious. He filed for temporary custody and claimed Vanessa was mentally unstable. Vanessa gave the court every recording and message she had. She was not completely innocent. She knew Nathan was engaged. She knew returning to his life would hurt me, but Nathan had convinced her that I had accepted everything and simply did not want the arrangement made public. She thought Nathan had finally chosen her. Eventually, she realized she was only another part of his plan. Vanessa and I met face to face 6 days after Grace was born. She sat beside a window holding the baby. She looked exhausted. I stood near the door, unsure what to say. She spoke first. "I thought you would hate me. I don't like what you did." She nodded. "That's fair." I walked closer and looked at Grace. She was tiny, sleeping peacefully. She had nothing to do with any of this. Vanessa asked, "Would you like to hold her?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She did not pressure me. That was the first time I understood that saying no did not require a speech. I did not have to become angry. I did not have to apologize. I could simply say I wasn't ready, and that was enough. Vanessa later told me Nathan had not contacted her only 8 months earlier. He had started asking about the frozen embryos 2 years before. At the time, Nathan and I were already discussing marriage. The baby had not been an unexpected situation. It had been part of a plan for years, even more disturbing. My forged signature was not the only false document submitted to the fertility clinic. There was also a corporate ethics approval form. It claimed Cole Medical's board knew about the arrangement. The directors said they had never seen it. The story was no longer only about betrayal. It had become part of a much larger corporate investigation. During the second week of the investigation, Miles's company announced that it had purchased a major portion of Cole Medical's debt. When I saw the news, I was furious. I went straight to his office. He was in a meeting. I walked in and placed the article in front of him. "Is this why you helped me?" Everyone in the room went silent. Miles asked them to leave. When the door closed, he did not immediately explain. That made me even angrier. "You've wanted Cole Medical for years." "Yes." "You used my wedding scandal to lower the company's value." "No." "You bought their debt. Now you can influence the board." "Yes." I laughed bitterly. "At least you're more honest than Nathan." I turned toward the door. Miles called my name. "The debt agreement is on the desk. You can take it with you." I stopped. He explained that the collateral attached to the debt included my consulting company. 3 years earlier, Nathan had asked me to place part of my firm's accounts receivable into a shared security structure. He said it would help coordinate resources across the group. I trusted him and did not review every detail. If Cole Medical defaulted, the lender could take control of my company's assets. Miles had purchased the debt to prevent another investment fund from enforcing the agreement first. He did not buy it to take my company. He bought it to protect it. He pushed the full file toward me. On top was a signed release removing my company from the collateral agreement. I did not have to pay him. I did not have to work with him. I only had to sign if I wanted my company removed. Why didn't you tell me before making the deal? If the transaction failed, I didn't want you carrying the stress for no reason. I stared at him. How is that different from Nathan deciding what was best for me? Miles went quiet. Then he said, "You're right." He did not defend himself. He did not say he had only been trying to help. He simply admitted, "I should have told you first." He left the documents on the desk. "Have your attorney review everything. You can accept it or reject it, and if you believe I crossed a line, I'll step away." I did not forgive him that day, but I took the documents, because respect does not mean someone never makes a mistake. It means that when you tell them they hurt you, they do not try to make you doubt your own feelings. A month later, the independent investigation released its preliminary findings. Nathan had not only forged my signature over the previous 3 years, he had repeatedly bypassed internal ethics reviews and used false patient consent documents to move testing programs forward. Most of the projects had not caused physical harm, but 2 patients had agreed to treatments without being told everything they needed to know. Miles's opposition to Nathan had never been only about business. Miles's younger sister had once participated in one of Cole Medical's early trials. She was told the treatment carried very little risk. Her condition later became worse. She died without ever learning that warning signs had already appeared in the trial data. Miles had been searching for evidence ever since. He never told me because he did not want to use his sister's death to pressure me into leaving Nathan. When I learned the truth, I went to see him. He was sitting on a bench outside the hospital. I sat beside him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, "Do you hate him?" "I used to. And now I only want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." I looked at the people walking into the hospital. I handled a lot of his company's crises. I thought I was protecting the business. Maybe I was helping him hide things. Miles shook his head. "You can only be responsible for what you knew." That was when I cried, not because the pain disappeared, because for the first time in a month, someone told me I did not have to carry every mistake alone. 3 months later, Nathan was officially removed as CEO. Prosecutors opened investigations into identity fraud and falsified medical documents. The family trust was frozen. Nathan lost control of the company. He was also denied custody of Grace. He sent me many emails. At first, they were angry. He said I had destroyed him. Then came explanations. He said he had been terrified of losing the company. Eventually, the messages became apologies. He said he finally understood that he had always confused love with control. I never answered. Not to punish him. Some apologies are meant to become lessons for the person who gives them. They do not always need to become a reason for the person they hurt to return. Vanessa received primary custody of Grace. Nathan was given supervised visitation after the first court hearing. Vanessa carried Grace outside and asked whether I would become her godmother. I did not answer immediately. A week later, I visited her apartment. Grace was lying in her crib. For the first time, I picked her up. She wrapped her hand around my finger. In that moment, I did not think about Nathan. I did not think about the forged documents. I only saw a child who deserved to be loved well. I agreed to become her godmother, not her legal mother, not someone forced into a role another person had designed. I chose to be part of Grace's life in my own way. My consulting firm survived. We lost some clients, but we gained new ones who valued corporate ethics and honest communication. I renamed the company Open Line Strategies. At the entrance to our office, I placed one sentence on the wall: "Without information, there is no consent." Miles placed Cole Medical's debt under the control of an independent trust. He did not turn the company into one of his own subsidiaries. He also did not immediately try to date me. We worked together. We attended hearings together. Sometimes we had dinner after long days. He never asked when I would be ready for another relationship. One evening I finally asked, "Are you not interested in me anymore?" Miles was drinking coffee and almost choked. He looked at me. "I thought you needed space." I did. So I was waiting for you to decide. I smiled. Then I've decided that I can have dinner with you Friday night. Is it a date? That depends on how well you behave. Our first official date was not at an expensive restaurant. We went to a small Italian place. The waiter brought us the wrong order. Then it started raining hard before we left, but it was the most relaxed evening I had experienced in years. I did not need to look perfect. I did not need to manage anyone's image, and I did not have to wonder whether Miles was secretly arranging my future without me. Miles and I dated for a year and a half before he proposed. It did not happen at a hotel. It was not part of a major event. It happened at my new office on a Monday. I had just finished a terrible meeting. My lunch was still sitting untouched on my desk. Miles walked in and placed a small box in front of me. There's a ring inside. But you don't have to answer today. You don't have to say yes because we've been together for a long time. You can take as much time as you need. I opened the box. Inside was a ring and a blank card. The card had only 3 words, your choice. Always. I looked at it for a long time. Then I said, I don't need much time. We did not rush into marriage. We planned for 6 months. We signed a clear prenuptial agreement. We kept our businesses and assets separate. We talked honestly about children, work, family, money, and what we would do when we disagreed. Only 40 people attended our wedding. Vanessa sat in the front row with Grace. Grace was old enough to walk by then. In the middle of the ceremony, she suddenly ran toward us. Everyone laughed. Miles bent down and picked her up. So the 3 of us finished the final part of our vows together. That photograph still sits on my desk, not because it looks perfect, because every person in it chose to be there. People sometimes ask whether learning the truth 9 hours before my wedding was the worst day of my life. It wasn't. The worst thing is losing the right to choose and still believing that is what love looks like. Nathan was willing to give me a wedding, a beautiful home, a child. He was willing to design an entire future for me, but he never asked whether I wanted it. I used to believe that loving someone meant understanding them, helping them when they made mistakes, waiting when they were busy, standing behind them when they needed support. None of those things are wrong. What was wrong was that I slowly turned understanding into silence, support into obedience, loyalty into giving up my right to choose. Healthy love is not one person arranging an entire life for someone else. It means both people are allowed to say, yes, no, I need time, I don't agree, and they do not lose each other's respect for saying those things. My name was written on a forged document, but my consent was never there. Names can be copied. Signatures can be forged. The public can be fooled, but your right to choose only belongs to you. Love does have a price. It requires time, patience, honesty, and the courage to face your own flaws. But the price of love should never be your voice, your boundaries, or your right to decide what happens to your own life. I almost walked into my wedding and became the wife and mother Nathan had designed on paper. Instead, I chose the truth. I chose myself. And eventually I found someone who did not need to make my choices for me. So this is what I believe now. Someone who truly loves you will never be threatened by your freedom to choose. They will respect your choice and feel grateful that in the end you chose them.